Welcome to the Farming on Purpose podcast, a podcast for farmers and ranchers ready to shift for a stronger future. Today's challenges in agriculture are new, but the grit and determination required to be successful are not. On the Farming on Purpose podcast, you'll hear how producers of all sizes and practices are moving mountains for things they believe in, all in the name of an industry that keeps growing and innovating for a stronger food system and stronger farm families. I'm your host, Lexi Wright, and I'm excited to discuss where producers are finding success, challenging the status quo, striving for better, and keeping our heritage alive, all while producing the food we depend on. Welcome back to Farming on Purpose. Today I'm here with Frank Baggiolini, and Frank is the asset manager and content creator for Outlaw Ranch Care. Frank has a great history in ag, growing up around quarter horses, registered pulled Herefords, and row crop farming ever since you were a kid. And I'm really excited to talk about, what happened between that childhood and now where you're at, where you are operating Outlaw Ranch Care with your family. What did that journey look like? And tell us a little bit more about the business and what you guys offer as well.
Thanks for having me here, Lexi, to talk with you. Basically, we've always been in agriculture as a family. So I have three sisters, and we were all born and raised over in California. So we kind of started in the Central Coast area of California. And my dad farmed row crops in the Salinas Valley, which predominantly was lettuce and broccoli, cauliflower crops like that. That region is known for. When we were there doing our 4-H and projects and everything, it was always kind of the goal for me and my older sister to get into beef cattle for a project. At first, it was always, try sheep first and make sure that you can handle it, and then we'll talk about that. Well, we ended up in probably 1976. I remember it because it was bicentennial year at the California State Fair, and the Junior Polled Hereford Association was having a cattle sale. And so at that auction, my dad decided, at the time there was just three of us. And so he bought us each a heifer as our first, breeding project. And that, as auctions go, led to, he bid on a fourth. So, now he's got to buy 6. So each kid has 2. That went on until we had 13 head. And the 13th was a bred cow with a calf on the side. And so he said, there's 3 there. So you guys just have. So we kind of got into the purebred cattle business kind of quick. We all went to private schools. So we didn't have FFA as an option as we were transitioning out of the age for 4-H. So we started working with some breeders that we met through that auction that kind of helped us along and got us started. And so we were doing a lot of showing and, county fairs around the state. And we'd go to, occasionally go to Oregon and do some showing up there. And at one point, we now have our third sister, but fourth sibling. Mm-hmm. And myself and my oldest sister are basically graduating high school and starting college. We were looking around. We had made a move from the Central Valley of California, so around the Fresno area. And we're up there at our ranch counting, and it's like, we have 110 mother cows at this point, and we're the only ones running this operation. My parents really, they were there in a supportive role, but we were doing all the work. And at that time, going into college, it just was too much. So we just started dispersal of the herd. And my transition, basically, as I started into college, was I got more interested in just working. I was doing a lot of welding projects for the school, in fact, at Fresno State where I was at. And I went to work at a dairy. There was a friend's dairy in the area, and that was more important than actually studying. So I was doing really wonderfully in school. But I went to work when I got married, and it was in 1989. I went to work for a company that did orchard removal. So we removed orchards with wood grinders, and the wood chips were being removed from the field and sold to cogeneration electric plants. My older sister, Laura, went to work for a big commercial farming operation that dealt with fresh fruit markets. So peaches was their biggest thing, and strawberries was probably their next thing. So her and I both, even though I didn't graduate right away from school, I went right into work in the ag sector our family operation, now that the cattle were gone, we were still row cropping out in the valley. And that was more of doing custom farm work. So we had people that were bringing crop projects to us and we would farm them for them. It was still their crop, but it was on our land. That worked for a while. We did garlic, carrots, and tomatoes was a lot of the crops that we custom farmed. We did do a little bit of lettuce there. But row cropping at that point was not my biggest interest, and it wasn't my sister's either. So, when it came to time, it just, it kind of went away on its own. And, we went into our careers under these other ag companies. I did the orchard and removal for about 23 years and then transitioned to one of the clients who was a commercial farming company growing pistachios and almonds. I worked for them for 13 years, and everyone probably knows there's a lot of politics that goes into farming in California, mostly to do with water. So the company I had worked for basically had some financial problems, and they were forced to close their doors in 2024. My sisters, so of my three sisters, two of them had already transitioned to Texas from California. Heidi, who is the brainchild that started Outlaw Ranch Care, she married Billy, my brother-in-law, and the three of us are who work at Outlaw Ranch Care. We met Billy when Heidi's kids were high school rodeoing.
Okay.
And junior rodeoing, really. So they had met there, and he worked for a large farming operation over in the Central Coast area. And that outfit was a very diversified operation. They had a herd of Angus cattle. They had a lot of farming on their ranch, which is mostly hay crops for the cattle. It was all under irrigation, and it's in a challenging water area anyhow. They get kind of a rain shadow effect, so they don't get a lot of rainfall. And then they also moved into olive and vineyards. The vineyards, I don't know that they did a lot. Once I started going to the ranch to help Billy, it was mostly olive, and they did a lot of their own olive milling to create the olive oils. I'd help Billy a little bit around the ranch when I'd have time to go over there, mostly with the cattle. So when there was times when they needed to, do weaning or work brandings, or if they're shipping out cattle and whatnot, I'd always go over there because I needed to get my horses a job somewhere. And so it's a really good experience for my young horses to go out there and ride them up and down slopes and cross creeks and moving cattle, and dealing with that is just, was the best way to really get some training under some of my horses. And I just team roped, as a hobby, around the Fresno area. So it was a good experience to see the different types of agriculture in California, especially when you're in that Central Coast area, because it's a unique area for legacy farming. And, big families there, they own that ground. The ground is so expensive. It has to stay in family control, or it just goes away,
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to hear you talk about your background. One of the things that I think is so cool about agriculture is you could learn your whole life and still not know everything there is to know, just because it's so diverse, But it's interesting to hear you talk about what you call row cropping is not at all what I in the Midwest would call row cropping. Here we call the fruits and vegetables and the nut crops specialty crops. But to you, who grew up in California, it's row cropping. And it's so interesting. Obviously we live in a large country, but how different the agriculture practices are in different areas it's fascinating. It's one of the things I think has been so fun about doing this podcast is you get to hear from all different kinds of people who have different experience in those kind of different sectors like that.
Oh, absolutely. It's 100% different culture shock sometimes, when you're talking to people. And my wife and I have recently moved to Oklahoma. So we're only about 4.5 hours away from Billy and Heidi's place. There's a lot of factors that go into a major move like that. But the biggest factor was, I was in between jobs, as far as finding something. I've got a lot of equipment experience, I do from the jobs I've had with orchard removal and with the farming companies that I worked under. It was always equipment heavy, managing the everything you need when you have a big equipment fleet. Billy had the diversity on one ranch of a cattle operation in addition to, farming olives, which is a very specialty crop. When we'd get together and help each other on projects and stuff, it just became he and I had different things from our backgrounds that we had experiences with. So some things we could bounce off each other, and we knew very well, like if we were going to go well defense together, we didn't have to really have a lot of conversations about it because we both knew what we were doing. Mm-hmm. It was easy to work together and do something like that. But I never farmed olives, and he never farmed like almonds or pistachios. So anything like that was something new, just to talk about the different things and how we handled situations like that. His ability to work in the processing environment for olives, it's very, I guess, an intense operation, because from what I understand is if you're over processing or under processing, the olive oil just isn't going to be the same quality. Mm-hmm. And so, it was an important thing where I didn't get to experience a lot of that kind of stuff. My processing was just machinery out in the field. They actually moved to Texas earlier than I moved to Oklahoma. And so Billy started using his skills to help neighbors. And out of that is where kind of Outlaw Ranch Care got started. And so, his ability to take his skills and start helping people with their ranches.
So is he doing primarily like just custom work or, side ranch help, or what did that look like in the early days of what Outlaw Ranch Care was?
In the early days, it was literally someone would need help putting up a horse shelter or putting up a fence. A fence turned into entrance gates to a ranch. He is in the west of Fort Worth area, so Weatherford general area there, which that area is, population-wise has increased dramatically. So what was happening was a lot of first-time landowners purchasing property that had a vision or a dream of what they wanted that to be, but had absolutely no experience dealing with everything that comes with land ownership. The thought process of, oh yes, I want to have some cattle and I want to, graze grass and I want it to be green all around me all the time. And then the reality starts set in is, okay, so I bought a piece of property and that fence isn't good enough because they're, if they did buy a couple cattle, maybe they're getting out all the time. So it turned into more of, he was doing custom work for some people, maybe setting up water trough and all, to helping somebody who had no idea what they were doing with their land and helping with that vision. That's where things started to kind of grow. So Heidi's idea was, to try to portray our experiences that we brought with us into an area that was growing for first-time landowners. And that's where we started creating some videos to put in, what we call a library of how-to videos that goes into our Country Living Academy. Is what it's called. And, basically it's kind of things about, we have categories in there that's like, fencing and gates, different welding projects like that versus haying fields. And some of that, the haying that Billy started doing was small square bales because of the, there's a lot of round bales in the area, but it's a new landowner doesn't usually have the equipment to handle a big round bale. They haven't thought about, tractors with loaders. They haven't thought about trucks with bale beds on them or anything like that. They're left missing part of that. Now, they will likely transition to that, but if they started with small square bales they can handle by hand, it made things easier. And it was kind of a niche because some of the pasture areas that he was working with were small.
Well, and it's nice to have less of a capital investment for them getting started. If they're first-time landowners, buying land for the first time and then also buying all of the equipment is a big undertaking.
It is a big undertaking, and it's an area that in the academy I work with. We actually have an equipment consulting component, and that is the reason for just what you brought up is people get overwhelmed real quick, and a lot of them go to the first tractor dealership they remember driving by, and that salesman gets real happy because there was some money and they don't really have a lot of knowledge, and he sells them a tractor with 4 or 5 different implements, and then they bring it home, and then they're worrying about, I don't even know how to unhook and hook up a PTO shaft. I bought a 30 horsepower tractor. I needed a 50, but they don't figure that out for the first year.
And even ongoing, I think that's always a question that comes up in, farming, ranching, homesteading is what equipment is going to best suit our needs for this season of life or of the business as it is. I mean, my husband and I have that conversation almost constantly. I'm like, well, we could probably update this tractor, or it'd be much better if we had this piece of equipment. And it's an ongoing thing forever, I think.
I think it is because people's operations grow. right?
Yeah.
So you start young and small with your operation, and you start transitioning into something, whether it's, my goal is to get back into beef cattle. Right. So, when we bought property in Oklahoma, I bought 20 acres, and it's basically 20 acres with almost nothing on it. And it was really unkept. It was overgrown, hadn't been grazed in 6 years. So it was a mess. So we're documenting that whole property and getting it up to, where we're going to have, cattle handling facilities on it. It's a 20-acre piece. So I anticipated I can easily keep like 6 pairs there. And in this area around my property, there's a lot of small parcels like that. People who don't have a big herd. So, I start thinking about, well, what can beef producers in this area utilize, good? And it's usually good genetics on their bulls. If they have some good base cows, it's like, well, how can we get better genetics in there? And that's probably a lot of my thought process comes from my purebred herd and, going out and AIing, your heifers or your cows. And, so you get different bloodlines in there, and you don't have to have a bull, but you usually would cover with a bull after maybe doing some AI, right? So owning a bull is a difficult for some people. Plus, if they want to keep all their heifers for replacement, it's not a good practice to be owning a bull you're going to use for 6 years. A strategy is probably like bull leasing. And so, one of my goals is to have, some cows that I can have on my place and have 2 or 3 registered bulls that I can use and rotate around in my heifers and then lease out to area, growers. So I think there's things like that, we hope to grow into ourselves. The first time landowner is not going to know that a lot of time. And sometimes, we have to give guidance. I know Billy's working with a client right now that just got his first couple of heifers at his ranch, and Billy's, helped him do, everything for his operation. He's a successful doctor in the Dallas area. And, he knew what he wanted for his place, but had no knowledge. So he's kind of like, the ideal client, I guess you could say, because he's learning a lot about, how to even buy a stock trailer, how to, set up his barns and sheds so that he can get large equipment or trucks in there that he never thought about. If I got a load of hay, how am I going to get this truck in the property to get it turned around?
And you don't ever think about it until the semi is sitting at your driveway and like, oh. Yeah.
Right.
And I think we had a guest on not too long ago that was talking about how, having cash flow alongside a farming operation really allows you to be a lot more successful. So you having these additional revenue streams with either leasing bulls or the Outlaw Ranch Academy, the other services that you guys are offering to neighbors is a tremendous way to make sure that you are set up to grow your ranch well.
No, it's for sure. And I think, I think it was one of your recent podcasts. The lady you were interviewing was talking about how a lot of the transition of ranches right now, I think she had an astronomical amount of acreage that's getting ready. So she was talking about the succession planning. When you consider, I was listening to that, and I'm thinking, well, that's, really important, because it's fine if the kids, went away and came back. They grew up around that knowledge that dad or grandpa helped them with. So they may not need as much help as somebody who decides to go buy one of those ranches, or they're married into a family and they come with, the husband still has a 40-hour-a-week job off ranch, and they're going to stay and help on ranch. And that is a possibility of like people who need help on certain things, maybe not everything. And that's why the academy is nice. It's like you can pick kind of where you need help. And it also gives you an avenue to do a private consultation with either Billy or I to just get that help. And, where we can kind of interview somebody and find out, okay, well, where's your challenges? Let's talk about some of those, because if they don't have any problem getting on a tractor and mowing the field, well, there's no sense in helping them with that. If they've got good facilities already, fences are installed, water troughs are set up, they don't need help with that. But they might need it with, how do we keep the invasive weeds out of my pasture? Things like that.
Yeah, and there's so many factors to property management or ranch management that a first-time person just, they don't have any opportunity for that exposure. So to even ask the question of, what are you going to do about weeds? is a thing that they had maybe not thought of. Now, I want to talk more about the videos in the academy. So you mentioned, baling hay, fences and gates. Talk to me a little bit more about what you're teaching in those videos. Are you teaching like the questions to ask about those things or the actual processes, a little of both? What's that look like?
Probably a little of both. It's mostly the processes. So if somebody, for example, let's go to the trailer example. They decide they're going to go buy their first stock trailer or flatbed trailer to haul hay bales on, or something like that. And they've never really had an experience in backing a trailer, right? Which is everybody's nightmare, is when they pull the trailer as well. As long as I can go forward, I'm fine. We created a bunch of videos on backing techniques in gooseneck trailers, in bumper pull trailers, how to hook and unhook. So things like that are very simple, but people who have had a background like we've had, it's second nature. Right? You learned it from your dad, grandpa, whoever. You were on a ranch where you couldn't kill anybody and you got to practice whatever you want, and that worked out. But for that new landowner, trailers are a anxiety level that seems to be the worst. That's worse than driving a tractor with a mower. That's an area where we'll do it. We have some gardening and farming areas in the videos. A lot of it is centered around greenhouse farming. Others is your pasture management. There's homesteading techniques in there, water storage, fuel storage for above ground tanks. And some people don't even know that you can have bulk delivery of fuel. We deal with a lot of different topics, like maybe shopping for storage containers and what to look for in storage containers. And so we partner with a couple of different creators that are kind of in the area that deal with those things. And so that gives us the ability to share their product, and then they're also sharing our academy products. And basically the idea is to get feedback on what people want to see. Like on my property, I'm documenting everything that we're doing on that. So whether it's removing brush, doing general cleanup, to starting to build the new fences, setting up, your pump house and managing, so we don't have freezing pipe problems, those techniques that we handle. So I think people could get, who don't understand about how to wrap pipe, exposed pipe, would get something out of the videos because they could see it done, understand what to buy at, one of the big bulk stores, and feel like that they can go tackle it. I had a consultation with a guy on his equipment, and he bought a tractor and he inherited all the implements. They were on the piece of property that he bought, and he was farming, but he basically just needed help. Like, what equipment do I use when I want to just go control weeds versus, when I want to go deal with something actually in the crop, like harvesting his crop. So he was looking for two different kinds of cutting attachments, and it was like guiding him through what he had and how it could work temporarily. But ideally, he probably needs like a sickle bar. We had somebody recently that was working with animal shelter, and it was just thinking of how the patterns of how the cattle will move through the pasture and working pens, and where they may go for their water source and where the shelters are going to be effective based on expected storm traveling into the area.
Well, I think it's really important to note that you're documenting this, what you're doing on your property, which I think is fantastic. It gives people a real tool to use if you're going to potentially go through the same process, which a lot of first-time landowners will go through, that cleanup phase and restructuring phase. But that takes a lot longer for you to slow down and document it and teach about what you're doing than just doing the work.
It does. And it's sometimes, you get involved into doing something. It's like, I should video this, so sometimes it's just a matter of thinking at the right time and then coming up with getting things in the picture that you want to have that people can see. And then, you can describe it at the same time. We kind of set up our courses, if you will, into different series. So like my ranch, it's really what we're calling the property series. And in that, we can put different projects inside the series. So that the project is the fencing, or the project is setting up water so it doesn't, you have your freeze protection, you have your biosecurity of making sure it doesn't get contaminated in some way. It's those types of things that, that help, but it gives people a way to look for the series in the videos library that they want, and then they can drill into all the projects. And then if they have questions beyond that, or specifically on a project they saw, they can bring it up. And we usually offer our first consultation free, and then through their membership, they get so much time to schedule with us without additional costs, once they're a member. And that, and we always have a question area. If people have questions about a tool, or if they have a general question on a project they're doing, and if we can't answer it in our videos, because we'll create a video based on a question, something simple. Somebody was looking the other day for the VIN number on their trailer, so we did a video on it too, because we figured if one person has that question, could be a topic that we need to have covered for other people.
Well, I think and having those resources to be able to refer back to whenever you come up against those questions, or you guys to reach out to when those questions arise, is really valuable and saves people so much time versus Googling and not knowing, is this the right answer? Is this, applicable to my situation? Or, how do I need to consider this differently than whatever answers I've come across? I want to talk just a little bit about the value of what you're doing on the bigger picture of agriculture, because I think that it's kind of controversial. You are talking about helping these people who are buying, ranchettes, which a lot of landowners are not a fan of, and you're giving them skills to become productive landowners. What does that mean to you?
I look at it, I get that, I've been from, an agriculture family all my life, and I understand it's not fun to go see something that was in your family or a neighbor's family, and you take a, big operation that maybe had 5,000 acres, and all of a sudden they sell off 3 little parcels on one edge for their operation, and it created, 4 10-acre parcels that now people are moving in. What's worse, in my opinion, is somebody who comes into a 10-acre parcel, doesn't know what they're doing, is making literally an eyesore that you have to drive by every day. And it's like, people are already, like you say, they're not really happy that those 10-acre parcels are there, but they're really worried about what it looks like when they have to drive by and look at it every day. In my opinion, it's making that a functioning piece of property. It makes it more eye appealing for the landowner. It makes them feel satisfied that their vision is coming true. And then so if you're driving by as a legacy landowner in that area, and you see at least the operation looks nice. I think what I've found is when people appear to go in at it properly, and then they start showing up at their ag extension, field days or something like that, where that farmer is going for maybe his continuing education for, his pesticide application license. Sure. And he sees that guy and he recognizes him, and then you see him at the feed store. It's like maybe then they start putting things together. Well, it's amazing how the ag community will help each other. But it's like once they get past that stereotype, it's like, well, now you're helping that person. And they've shown that they want to take care of their property correctly, take care of a couple head of cattle, have some, sheep or goats or something else there. I think it's an avenue to do what's right for your neighbor, but it is a hard sell when it doesn't look good. And people get overwhelmed with property. They didn't even think that they needed to mow it so many times in a year.
And I think it's important to think about, what you can and can't change. Some bigger landowners might be upset that, big pieces of land might be broken up and developed into smaller parcels that people are living on. It's like, that's already happened. You can't change that that's happened, but you can help those people to keep the land productive instead of letting it go to waste or letting it, just sit there, or worse, get auctioned off into even smaller parcels that then becomes a subdivision. So I think it's about thinking about what's in our control. And that's what I love about what you're doing is you're giving people, new landowners, tools to really be productive and kind of an entryway into agriculture.
Yeah, it is. And if you talk with a lot of people, they really want the agricultural life.
Yeah.
The cowboy is coming back. It's been coming back for, several years now, and then you can call it the Taylor Sheridan effect or whatever. Yeah. But, you listen to some other podcasts and it's like the most random people are buying cowboy hats now, and they have to be taught. And there's a way to teach them to make them feel like they're doing something properly, like what's forward and what's backwards on a cowboy hat. But if you show them, they want to wear it correctly. They don't want to look like they don't belong. So it's like that in anything they do with their land. And that's kind of the way we've approached it. Now I've got friends of mine that say, what are you doing, on that YouTube video? It's ridiculous. Not everybody knows how to jump a battery on a tractor, but they go out there and it won't start. What do? And yes, everybody can jump on YouTube and everybody can, look at things that we have in ours. And it's more of a personal touch, because if they needed an additional part to it, because that's my frustrating part with what I'm working on a project and I go to YouTube. It's like, yeah, I see a lot of examples, but not on the one I'm working on. I need to ask 2 questions that would make my project, okay, now I feel like I've got the right information and I can go do this myself. And so knowing that that's what I like, it's like, okay, now I can give that to other people.
I feel like that's a resource that a lot of beginning farm wives could benefit from too, because my husband knows how to do all that stuff. But on the day that he's not here and I have to go do it, I'm like, okay, here we go. Guess I'm going to be FaceTiming him a lot, but when he doesn't always have time for a FaceTime. And I think, like you said, it's the teaching them how to do it in a way that is helpful to them, is productive. I hesitate to say the right way because there's so many different ways to do things, but a way that really helps them excel is so powerful, because then you have so many more producers who care about the things that the existing producers care about. And all of a sudden our voices get a lot louder when it comes to politics and things like that. And I think that that is maybe something we all need to consider a little bit more, is if you are on your soapbox about people not being able to get started in agriculture or buy these smaller acreages, that's not helpful to you. It's actually helpful to you if they do.
It is. And, look at the concern about our size of our herd in the beef industry. It's like, okay, well, if one guy can't go out there and get a couple truckloads of heifers to, boost up his herd because the prices are so high. Well, what if 100 small landowners each bought 5 head? So it is. It's kind of the community taking care of the community in itself. And from my perspective, coming from California, land is so expensive. It's hard to go buy 20 acres and do what I'm doing in Oklahoma is much easier over here, but you want to talk about politics getting in your business. That's what happens out there. You can't do anything on your property, and it's your property. You can't burn, you can't, do this, you can't do that, because somebody's offended by it. And I guarantee nobody wants that. It's trying to understand we have to kind of take care of ourselves in agriculture. And there are going to be new people coming in, because some families don't want to take over the family operation. And, dad's 80 years old now. Realistically, how long is he going to keep farming that, and then it's, maybe it gets passed down to 3 kids and they all have a different view of what they want to do with their portion. 2 of them probably sell off. One of them keeps his, third. It's the reality of how things are going, because there hasn't been over the last, 20 years, a good push to, get kids educated and back to the farm.
And I'm so thankful that there are people who are interested in it and getting started. We need those people. We need people to be interested at all levels, whether it's taking over a big operation or starting their own small one. And who can blame them? I'm so this is the life I've always dreamed of. I can't blame anybody else for wanting the same thing.
Oh, it's the same with me. Even though I was born into it, I transitioned a long ways from where I was. And it's like, okay, it's been 38 years. And I'm finally getting back to the point where, I can actually get back into some beef cattle. And it's, even though the desire's been there the whole time, it's like didn't have a mechanism to get me there.
Exactly. Yeah.
And people are going to do that. They're going to have different things in their lives that present opportunities. They just need to seize that opportunity. And if it's land ownership, even if it's for a hunting lease or something, it's still landowner. It's different when you go buy a piece of land. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, I got to take care of this now. Because we are. The farmers are the best stewards of the land. You don't need regulation. You need people who care.
You need that sense of responsibility that this is ours and we want it to be good.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it's great what you are doing, providing these resources for folks. How can somebody find you and Outlaw Ranch Care if they want to learn more?
Best and easiest way is to go to our website, which is outlawranchcare.com. You can get to the Country Living Academy there and check out. There's some of the portions are free. You get an experience of it and then decide if you want to get a membership. There's areas for discussion in there, and it gets to all our socials. So we're on all the social media profiles. We're really working more on our YouTube stuff, so getting our longer formats for that. So definitely look us up there. But the website will get you to all of us. So Heidi, Billy, and we're really looking forward to building this up, and it really comes from people who either ask questions that helps us build things up and give people what they're looking for.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that resource is available. We'll link it in the show notes so people can check it out and find you guys on social media. And I just want to wish you the best of luck with all of your upcoming content that you'll be putting out there. I know that's a lot to undertake, so I hope it's a joy to do and goes well.
Also, we'll get you some information here, but we're going to give you guys a discount code for any listener that wants to get 50% off for their first time on the Academy. That way people can try it out and get a discount at the same time.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. We'll be sure to put that in the show notes then.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Frank.
You bet. Take care.
If you've enjoyed spending time with us today, please take a moment to review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or join the conversation on social media. Do you have a topic you would like to discuss or know someone with a story to share? Apply to be a guest on the podcast at farmingonpurpose.com. You can follow the host of Farming on Purpose, Lexi, on your favorite social media platforms for more content by searching for Farming on Purpose. And remember, if you look around your table and aren't inspired by the people there, it's time to find a new seat.